Fan Zhendong, let's start with why being number one in the world is actually a curse, disguised as a blessing. That day came, July 30th, 2021. On that day, the stadium was electric. Tokyo, the Olympic men's singles final. The stage every player dreams of and every champion fears. Every camera was locked on one man, Fan Zhendong. At 24, he wasn't just the world number one, he was China's next great hope. The scoreboard became the stage for the dialogue between Fan Zhendong and Ma Long. Set 1, 11-4 to Ma Long. The opening game was a declaration. Ma Long's forehand burned through the rallies like a brand he'd been sharpening for decades. Fan looked sharp, but tight. 2 steps late on the big points. His backhand humming, but not biting deep enough. Set 2, 12-10 to Fan Zhendong. But Fan responded like a man born for the moment. He played straighter, harder, bolder. His backhand began punching through Ma Long's block, his serves biting low with heavy spin. A game of margins turned into a duel of nerves. Fan saved 2 game points, then stole the second with a roar that rattled the empty Tokyo arena. At 1-1, the story was wide open. Set 3, 11-8 to Ma Long. This was where Ma Long's genius showed. He didn't out-hit Fan, he out-thought him. Early counters, precise placement to the elbow, and variations that forced Fan into guessing. The third game wasn't decided on power, it was decided on patience. When Fan missed a backhand, at 8-9, Ma pounced, sealing the set with clinical precision. Set 4, 11-9 to Ma Long. Tension mounted. This was the heartbeat of the match. Every rally stretched into seconds that felt like minutes. Both players pushing, probing, testing the edges of their courage. But in the final 2 points, Ma found space where none existed, threading his forehand past Fan's anticipation. Set 5, 11-3 to Fan Zhendong. Just when the narrative seemed to tilt one way, Fan roared back. This was his most dominant spell, a storm of backhands that left even Ma reaching late. He flattened every ball, shortened rallies, and refused to let Ma Long breathe. Set 6, 11-7 to Ma Long. The final act arrived with inevitability. Fan fought, he really did, trading heavy topspins, lunging at the table, clawing for every inch. But Ma's composure was unshakable. He absorbed, redirected, and then struck, like a master painter adding his final strokes to a masterpiece. At match point, one last forehand sealed it. Ma Long won the gold. The world had seen the fall of a world number one. But history wasn't done. If stories like every world number one loses in the end inspire you, subscribe and drop a like to help more people discover them too. Ma Long, and then came Ma Long. Now, Ma Long isn't just any player. He's arguably the greatest table tennis player of all time. For more than a decade, he had been the mountain no one could climb. 6 Olympic gold medals, 28 world titles. And then came the day everything changed. On October 6, 2024, in Beijing, history was written in a way nobody quite expected. The China Smash final was supposed to be another coronation, another chapter in the endless saga of Ma Long, the man so great they call him the Dragon. At 35, Ma Long was no longer in his physical prime. His legs weren't as quick, his recovery between points a fraction slower. But his precision, his tactical brilliance, his aura, those were untouched. Across the table stood a teenager, Lin Shidong, just 19 years old, fierce, still unpolished at times, but already carrying the heavy burden of being called China's next big thing. Act 1, the aura of the dragon. The opening rallies went exactly as expected. Ma Long was clinical, efficient, ruthless. Lin Shidong fired his trademark backhand flicks, but Ma Long read them like children's stories. He absorbed the power, then redirected it with blistering counter loops that curved like lightning bolts. Every point was a reminder. This is what greatness looks like. Ma Long wasn't simply winning rallies, he was writing poetry with spin and placement. Lin Shidong opened like a storm, blasting past Ma Long 11-4 in the first. But the dragon adjusted, slowing the pace, forcing angles, and stealing the next 2 games 11-7 and 11-5. By the fourth, Lin threw everything at him. smashing, countering, refusing to yield. Yet Ma's patience proved deeper. At 15-13, the veteran closed the door, reminding the world that experience bends even the fiercest fire. Score 3-1 to Ma Long. For the commentators, it was all but done. Lin Shidong has shown promise, one analyst said, but against Ma Long, the mountain is too high. Millions watching at home nodded. The script seemed pre-written. Another Ma Long triumph. Another day of dragonfire. Act 2. The turn. But here's the thing about young players. They don't know the script. They don't know when to bow. They don't carry the weight of old scars. At 3-1 down, Lin Shidong didn't see inevitability. He saw survival. One more point, one more rally, one more chance to swing. And in the fifth game, something changed. Lin's hesitation disappeared. His strokes grew sharper, riskier. He took the ball earlier, right off the bounce, not giving Ma Long time to dictate. The teenager was no longer respecting the aura. He was attacking it. The crowd sensed it. Each point Lin won wasn't just another number on the scoreboard. It was an act of defiance. A teenager daring to stare into the dragon's eyes and whisper, "I will not bow." He clawed back the fifth, then the sixth, 3-3. The impossible comeback was alive. The arena was trembling. Fans weren't sitting anymore. They were standing, screaming, sensing that something historic was happening. Act 3, the decider. The seventh game was pure chaos. Every rally was a war. Ma Long leaned on experience, heavy spin serves, wide angles, deceptive placements. He slowed the rhythm, then sped it up, forcing Lin to think on his feet. At 8-8, the stadium was ready to burst. Every breath was held. Every rally felt like destiny. Lin stepped up to serve. The ball floated short and tight. Ma Long prepared, but in a flash, Lin pounced with a backhand flick so fast, so audacious, even the dragon couldn't touch it. 10-8. Match point. The crowd erupted. The final rally was chaos. Spin, speed, defense, counterattack. Ma Long dug deep, refusing to let go. But then, the ball sailed just long off the table. The scoreboard lit up. Lin Shidong 4-3, Ma Long. The world had seen the fall of a world number one. But history wasn't done with Lin Shidong. If stories like "Every world number one loses in the end" inspire you, subscribe and drop a like to help more people discover them too. Lin Shidong, The Rise. A crown at 19. In early 2025, after months of results that piled up like bricks in a monument, Lin Shidong reached world number one at 19. That headline didn't arrive on vibes, it arrived on verifiable dominance. His signature statement not only came from defeating Olympic champion Ma Long at China Smash 2024, but also at Singapore Smash 2025. Lin Shidong defeated Liang Jingkun in the final match, who was a four-time bronze medalist in men's singles at the World Table Tennis Championships. The world number one label didn't look premature, it looked inevitable. But the road to number one is also an audit. Rivals don't just watch, they take notes. Warnings in the wind. The ITTF World Cup had only just closed its curtains in Macau on April 20th, 2025. But for Lin Shidong, the echoes of that final still lingered. Before anyone could look ahead to the neon spectacle of the US Smash in Las Vegas, July 3rd to 13th, Lin had to reckon with what happened under the lights in Macau, a defeat that stung not just for its numbers, but for its meaning. In the men's singles final, Lin began the way a world number one should. Against Brazil's Hugo Calderano, he came out fearless, early on the ball, sharp off the bounce, aggressive in the mid-table exchanges. Every stroke carried intent. Every point felt like inevitability. The scoreboard confirmed it, 11-6 to Lin. For a few minutes, the final looked like it would be another step in China's uninterrupted march of dominance. But Calderano was not there to be a chapter in Lin's story. He was there to write his own. In the second game, Hugo widened his serve patterns, mixing half-longs with disguised placements that forced Lin into awkward decisions. Lin, who thrives on rhythm, found himself just half a beat late. Calderano stole the air out of the rallies, snatched time away, and leveled the match, 11-7 to Hugo. The third game was the hinge. Lin fought hard, his forehand whipping through the ball with urgency, but Calderano's economy, his ability to extract maximum value from minimum motion, was suffocating. Hugo baited Lin into overcommitting on the crossover, then punched counters down the line with surgical precision. Lin had his chances, but Hugo closed it, 11-9, and suddenly the match was tilting south. From there, the Brazilian storm gathered force. The fourth game was not a contest of equals, but a lesson in adjustments. Calderano owned the middle of the table, daring Lin to guess wrong. And when the Chinese teenager hesitated, Hugo struck. The scoreboard was brutal, 11-4 to Calderano. By the fifth, the weight was unbearable. Lin pressed, trying to manufacture initiative, but Calderano was already 2 steps ahead. He redirected pace, absorbed power, and punished impatience. Final score, 11-5, sealing the match 4-1 for Hugo Calderano. The arena erupted, not with the shock of an upset, but with the awe of history. For the first time, Brazil had a men's World Cup champion. For the first time, the Pan-American continent stood atop one of table tennis's most coveted podiums. Calderano raised his arms not just for himself, but for a region, breaking barriers that had stood for decades. But Macau was only the first crack. Las Vegas would show the fracture ran deeper. The 2025 US Smash, a World Table Tennis Grand Smash event, lit up Las Vegas from July 3rd to July 13th, staged in the Orleans Arena. For Lin Shidong, this was meant to be redemption. 64 days removed from his loss to Hugo Calderano in Macau, the 19-year-old world number 1 stepped onto the table against Japan's Tomokazu Harimoto, a player whose fire and ferocity often burned brighter than the stage lights. Lin moved like a man who knew his ranking and wanted the scoreboard to catch up. But from the first exchanges, it was clear this match would be no coronation. Game 1 went to Harimoto, 11-7. The Japanese star unleashed his trademark roar after every point, shaking the walls of the Orleans Arena. His serves bit, his backhand counters snapped, and Lin found himself reacting rather than dictating. In Game 2, Lin tried to stabilize, shortening rallies with sharp opening forehands, but Harimoto answered with blistering pace down the line, forcing errors from the Chinese teenager's forehand corner. The scoreboard tightened, but the verdict was the same, 11-9 to Harimoto. Now, Lin trailed 0-2, and the air was heavy with déjà vu. The hinge came in Game 3. Lin, unwilling to fold, dug in with trademark aggression, taking balls off the bounce and pushing Harimoto off balance. At 12-10, he snatched it on a razor's edge, a roar of his own cutting through the arena. That defiance spilled into Game 4, where Lin's rhythm finally clicked. He dominated the middle ground, cutting off Harimoto's angles and turning defense into offense. At 11-9, the match was level at 2-2. For a moment, the tide seemed to be turning. Game 5 belonged to Lin as well, 11-7, and it looked like the teenager had solved the puzzle. The scoreline was 3-2. His footwork was alive, and his forehand was back to its venomous best. One more push, and the final awaited. But Harimoto thrives in chaos. The sixth game was a storm. Harimoto's intensity returned full throttle, short exchanges, broken by sudden explosions of speed, counters that punished every overreach. Lin cracked under the pressure, dropping at 5-11. That sent the semifinal to a seventh and deciding game, the sport's purest test of nerve. Lin looked tight, tentative, while Harimoto charged forward with fearless acceleration. The Japanese prodigy seized momentum early and never looked back, running away 11-6. Final score 4-3 to Harimoto. The Orleans Arena erupted, half in shock, half in awe. Lin Shidong, the world number 1, had been stopped again. This time not by history's first Brazilian champion, but by a Japanese rival whose fire refused to be extinguished. After watching the every world #1 loses in the end, which part surprised you the most? Comment below and share your thoughts with the reason why.